Hello there, fellow truth seekers. Doug coming to you again on this here Shabbat. Thankful to be able to come and do this again. This is always a joy for me to be able to do Bible study and discover truth from the Word of Elohim. I hope all you folks have been well, and I hope that this lesson, it's a continuation of the lesson from last week, this time focused on Ashtaroth. And I'm going to show where really Ashtaroth is not just, or Ashtaroth, but it's also Ishtar, Diana, Diani, Ananu, Anani. I mean, just a bunch of different names that this same entity goes by. The Queen of Heaven. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because people can get, the Blessed Virgin Mary. Same entities. The BVM is not the mother of Christ. That's a fact. They try to imply that that's who it is, but it's not. It is Ashtaroth or Ashtaroth, and so I've got a slew of scriptures now, and I probably won't get into all of them, but I will put them in the description as I always do, so that you can go and study these scriptures for yourself. And you'll see that this has been an ongoing thing with humankind pretty much ever since the fall of man. Now, of course, the fall when whenever in Genesis 6, whenever these fallen ones began to come down here and started interacting with human beings, the people were not worshiping idols and stuff. They were worshiping these entities. So, they wouldn't putting up altars and all that stuff. They were coming to these entities and to these hybrids and worshiping them. And then it was only after the flood, and when those giants and stuff were, and hybrids and all were wiped out, that afterwards they began to worship them, as idols, statues, groves, poles, and when you read in the scriptures, it talks about that the Ashtaroth or Ashtaroth would be worshipped as a grove of trees, or they would make what they called a pole, an Ashtaroth pole that would be placed next to the altar of the Most High. And he really had to tell them over and over again, don't do this. They just kept doing it over and over again, especially during the time of the judges. They really, done it, and they would end up, the father would not drive these people out. In fact, during the time of Joshua, a lot of these tribes of peoples that were there, that he commanded them to drive out. Of course, Joshua, drove a bunch of them out and was, but even after Joshua had, he began, when they had a little moment there where they wasn't really at full-blown war, he divided up the land according to their lot, the tribes. He'd give them their particular piece of land that they were going to occupy. And so those tribes were supposed to go and drive out those people that were in that area that they were in. Well, a lot of the times they didn't do that. They, decided that they would rather make them like tributes or tributaries, so that, make them pay tribute to them, and do labor for them and stuff like that, rather than doing what they were supposed to do, which was drive them out. And because they would become a stumbling block and a snare to them in the future. Well, because they didn't, the Father said He allowed that. He allowed that to happen just so it would be a test to them. It would be to test them as to whether they were going to be obedient to Him and to His commands, not to worship these gods, not to set up these groves and these, idols and stuff of these people that they drove out. But as always, they, whenever one of these judges, once, I would say that Joshua was sort of their first judge, but then he died, and as soon as he died, they began to do this stuff, and of course then the Father would raise up another judge. I think the first one was Obadiah or something like that he raised up because what would happen is every time they would start worshiping these idols and setting up these groves and stuff, the Father would allow these people around them to come in and take them over. The Philistines or the Amalekites or the Midianites or the Moabites or whoever, whichever group that was near to that tribe that started doing it. Because it wasn't always Israel collectively that done it. It would usually be a tribe that would start doing it. Whether it was Dan or Manasseh or Ephraim or Naphtali or Issachar or whoever, one of them would pick it up because they were, they had allowed these people to stay there. And because they allowed them to stay there, they would ultimately end up, just like He tells us there in Deuteronomy 28 and Deuteronomy 12, whenever you get into the land and you say, how did they worship their gods? Well, that's what they would begin to do. He told them that's what they were going to do, and they did. They were living among some of these people, and Jebusites and different ones, and Amalekites, and He said, don't go after their gods, and don't worship Me the way they worship their gods. Well, they would all, end up doing it, and so He would allow these people to take them over, to overpower them and subjugate them. And this went on and on and on throughout. You read the book of Judges. This goes on and on. And He raises up a judge, and this judge, ends up, leading, mighty men to run these people out or defeat them or kill them off or whatever, and restore the true worship. And then they end up, they die off or something, and then they go right back in to doing it again. And so, it's sort of like that old saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. They would do the same thing over and over and again as if it was going to be some kind of different result that come from it. Well, it never was. It always wound up with them, being taken over by these people that they followed after their gods, and being enslaved or subjugated to them, and them having to be, and it would get so bad that they would start crying out to Yahuwah to deliver them, and then of course He would hear them and have mercy on them, and He would raise up a judge that would deliver them. And somebody that had been faithful to Him, that had not went after these gods and stuff. And so I want to show where here Ashtaroth Astarte, Ishtar, Diana, Nanani, Inani, on and on and on. And the different names, and I've got two different things that I printed out here, but they're the same. I mean, when you begin to look at it, this is one of the. If you look at that picture right there, that's one of the depictions of her, of Inanna. But now that was because she originally had been being worshipped over there in Sumeria, in Mesopotamia, back early on. And of course, this goes all the way back to the time of Nimrod, which, in that area they called him Gilgamesh. And some people believe that, he also went by the name of Baal. A bunch of different names that they go by, and the same with this one here. I mean, they got a list in here and her symbol also is the planet Venus. Supposedly in the Sumerian pantheon of gods, Sin was the moon god. And then you had another one that was the sun, and that Sin was her father, and was the father of Inanna, and when this is a pretty extensive, but like I said, you can print these off from on Wikipedia, and again, this is just information that is the pretty standard archaeological and paleontology. I think the study of human development, and human history. But it goes way back, and to the time, like I say, back at the Tower of Babel and all that, and the stories of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh and all that, which, like I say, a lot of people believe that Gilgamesh was Nimrod. That was just the name that he was given after that. But when you look through here, you find out that she's got all of these different names, and it's got a bunch of references, like books that have been written by these scientists and stuff that study all this history and study the archaeology, the old languages, the Akkadian and the Sumerian languages, and when they begin to look at it and they look at the characteristics of, here we go. I mean, these are the names. If you can see here, this is Astarte, and it's turning it around there, but it's Hara, Nananya, Ninagal, Ninasiniana, Sasuska, Penikir, Ishtar, Astarte, and on and on and on. The Queen of Heaven, the Mother of Heaven. I mean, it just ties it in when you look at Ashtaroth. Well, it's Asherah, but it's also Ashtaroth. Again, all these different names. And Dione. I mean, and and it says, you know, again, their symbol, her symbols, Ashtaroth pole. That pole, they would put them up next to the altar there at the tabernacle or at the temple. And whenever Paul in the book of Acts was there, you know, the temple of Diana, same thing. And you know, and like I said, you know, a lot of times they try to, you know, people try to say that they were prostitute cults, you know, where the priestesses were prostitutes and stuff, but a lot of times that wasn't really the case. You know, it really comes down to, like I said last week about Baal, is that it is the prostitution of the fault, you know, the going from the true system of worship of our Creator to worshiping the creation and you know, playing the whore or the harlot. That's really what it's indicating. And you know, in this particular religion here, this worship of Ashtaroth, those people that worship Diana and all, that's the transgender stuff. Because people don't realize that, you know, there in Jeremiah chapter 10, when it talks about them cutting down the tree and they fasten it with hammers and, you know, nails and wood to make it stand up, and they adorn it with silver and gold. Well, they were putting these balls on it. And that came from the cult of Diana or Ashtaroth or Ishtar, whichever one you want to call it, where they would take these people that were just diehard followers, would cut their scrotums off, and they would throw them on this tree. In other words, cut their balls off and throw them on the tree. And it was a fir tree, or a, you know, because Lebanon and that area around there was full of these fir trees, you know, and cedar trees and stuff. So that's why you have these Christmas trees, because that's what they were doing. And they would go around afterwards, and they would have these festivals and stuff where they would go around with scalpels, you know, and their followers would, you know, the men would go around with women's clothes on, and the women would go around with men's clothes on. I mean, can it be any more clear than that? That is the you know, the transgender. And you know, the Father tells us there in the New Testament Scripture, it says that because they would not receive the truth, for this cause are they given over to a strong, not a strong delusion, but they're given over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not natural. You know, sin against their flesh. And that's what that's talking about, is that they are given over to a reprobate mind to do these things which are inconvenient and that are not natural, and leave their natural affection. I mean, over and again it says that, you know, in the latter days they'll leave their natural affection. In other words, men going after men, women after women. And an offshoot of that is this Diana worship. And these people, they are deceived, and they don't have no idea what this means. Now, back in the 60s, and I wish I had some of the clips from it, but they was this one woman that was, you know, or man, woman, I don't know what gender they were identifying in, but it was a very manly looking woman. I think it was a woman, and it was a very manly looking woman. And if you look at all these depictions, look at the Statue of Liberty, for example. That's supposed to be a feminine, you know, a woman, but it, you know, has a lot of masculine attributes to it. And when you look at a lot of these statues that they have depictions of Ishtar and stuff, they're very masculine looking. And that's the, and also this, um, um, like the Baphomet um, statues that they are erecting around and stuff. It's the same thing. It's got these, it has breasts like a woman and you know, feminine aspects, and androgynous. Androgynous, and this woman that was and it was when this stuff really broke out there in the late '60s, and and she was proclaiming Ishtar, proclaiming it. So this woman had been taken over. And it's funny too, that the sign, one of the symbols of Ishtar is supposedly the rainbow flag, the rain, and what's the symbol for the alphabet community? It's a flag and a rainbow flag. And what did the president of the United States, Barack Obama, when he was president, illuminated the whole White House with the rainbow flag, the colors of the rainbow. And it's just, an affront to the Father, because he promised Noah with a sign of the rainbow that he would never destroy the earth with a flood again. And she's also called the goddess that steals from the gods. She steals their symbols and other things, that she commandeers for her own, and so that's what she does, and so. I feel like it's very important for people to understand this, that this is what's going on. They don't equate it with what it really is. They just think it's just they've been led by people to believe it's just free expression. It's just human expression. It's just I'm born that way, and all that kind of stuff, and that ain't the truth. The truth is, it's the spirit of these entities that are putting this in people's minds, and they've been given over to that because they would not receive the truth. And the truth is what I'm telling you here now, that about these entities and what they do, and how they manifest themselves. And we're seeing that manifest because he gives them over to these entities. Just like he did those people back there at Babel, whenever they wanted to worship all these false gods and stuff, and try to ascend up to heaven, through a portal or whatever. They were trying to access an access point, a portal into heaven, and it says that the Father says nothing that they imagine to do will be withheld from them. So they would have eventually have succeeded. Because they were all of one mind to achieve it. And it's the same today. Look at the way technology has advanced at such a rapid pace, with the help of these entities, giving them, forbidden knowledge. But the Father allows it. He allows it because, we have to understand the repercussions of doing it, what comes from it. And so he allows it, and gives these people space, to see the results of their actions, and to give them a chance to repent. But most of the time they get so drawn down into the pit that they can't crawl out. And there's really no difference between these two entities, and they're the same ones. and I mean, this is going back to, which it says here, somewhere between 4000 BCE and 3100 BCE, but I'd say it's somewhere after 3000 BC, because they're going by, man's, distorted and, the deception of the timeline of history. They believe that, the earth is billions upon billions of years old. And, this system that we're in, we don't know how old it is. But we know, we can pretty much gather from verses 1 and 2 of Genesis chapter 1 that there was a destruction before man was put here. There was an earth here, and before that, and it was destroyed, and then it was remade, and then man was put here. Well, that period of time before that, we don't know how long that was. We don't know how long this structure that we're in has been here. It could be here for billions of years. We don't know. But we know that man's time here since the recreation is 6,000 years approximately. With the flood happening at somewhere around 3000 BC. And I think that the time before the flood is known as AM. I can't remember exactly why they call it AM, but it's AM. And so then from that period was like 1,000 years or something like that, or maybe a little bit longer, but something like that, 1,000 years. And then you had the flood, the destruction, and then you began the new age from then till the time of the Messiah, and then from then to now. And so but anyway, just as soon as man had settled, the dust had settled, the water had receded and the dust settled after the flood, they went right back to worshiping these created beings. And of course, at this point, there's the Titans and all are gone. They're wandering spirits now, and so they began to produce, more, because they're in Genesis 6. It says they were in the land in those days and also after that. So they were there from that period on up until the flood, and then after the flood, they reappeared. They began to reappear. Now, there's a couple different theories as to how these entities began to show up as far as the hybrids. Some people think that they came through the daughters or the wives of Noah's sons, because it was only Noah's family that was totally genetically pure. Their wives, on the other hand, were not. But again, I've talked about epigenetics, how if you live righteously, it will rewrite your DNA to get rid of iniquity. And iniquity is inherited sin or inherited corruption. So if you do something that is blatant sin, it can also write that into your DNA, and you can pass that on to your children and to your grandchildren. That's iniquity. Okay, and so because of Ham's sin against his father, he went in and he defiled his, it says he looked upon his nakedness, which is believed it wasn't him that he had sex with, but his wife, his mother. And so because of it, he was cursed. And when you begin to look through the lineage at these offspring, I think his first offspring was Cush. And then Cush had Nimrod. And when you look at the lineage, and the same thing with Canaan, Canaan, in some of the extra biblical text says he had 6 fingers and toes, and that he was a giant. And he went to the land of Canaan. That's why it's called Canaan, because it was found, he's the one that went there and settled. And when you look at the land of Canaan, it was full of these hybrids. And then but they didn't. Any of them come through the line of Shem, but they did. Some come. Most of them came through the line of Ham, and some through the line of Japheth. And those that were through the line of Japheth were over in the area where Russia and that area is, and down into India. But after the Tower of Babel, when these people were stopped from doing what they were doing, and their languages was confounded, and they were some of them that were worshiping like monkeys and stuff like that, and some that were worshiping this elephant god or whatever. If you look in the mythology of the Hindu people, the people of India, they have depictions of these giants that lived in the forest there that had the faces like an ape, and it was a curse on them is what it was. And and the same with them elephant looking ones. There's one, I think it's Garuda, that has a face like a head and all like an elephant, body like a man but a head like of an elephant, and they worship them. So this is how this stuff came about, through curses and stuff, because of their epigenetics. They allowed the things that had happened pre-flood come down through the genetics of Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and was able to be transmitted because they continued to Ham and Japheth. Now Shem's bloodline, his wife, apparently she lived righteously, and so her epigenetics got rewritten to get rid of those things out of her genetics. And because we understand now that this is a fact, that our whole life is being written into our genetics through our epigenetics, which are the switches that turn things on and off. And so it can be rewritten or written over or whatever if you have something in there that's bad. That's why, if you repent and turn from sin and live righteously, eventually it'll be your DNA will be rewritten as far as the iniquity that has been written into your DNA can be written out and replaced with righteousness. And that's the whole idea about sanctification to obedience, is that's what's happening. Through the sanctification process, it is a rewriting of our DNA to write out these things. And it's funny, if you really live righteously and you really do what's right before the Father, you'll find out that after you've came to our Messiah and in true repentance and been baptized and filled with the Ruach, you it's sort of like you don't even realize it, but you begin to see these things that you did, these iniquities that you did, begin to disappear. And that's how they are disappearing, is that it's being written out of your DNA. And that's why they don't bother you anymore. They get to where, because they are in our DNA, then we're kind of motivated by them. They kind of tend to drive us, and until they're written out, and that is a process, because we have the iniquity of our bloodline going back all the way back to the beginning, so it can, but and over time, I'm sure that there's been in our bloodlines, there's been righteous people that have had it written out of it, and then down a generation or two later, they begin to do iniquity again, and it gets written back into their DNA, and it gets passed down through our genetics. But ultimately, we strive to get this stuff written out of our DNA, and when you read the book of Romans, that's kind of what it implies in a lot of that, is that, Paul, he said, those things which I would not do, that I do, and those things which I would do, that I do not. The things he wanted, that he knew was right to do, he wanted to do it, but he didn't, and the things he didn't want to do that he knew was wrong, that he did. But through being, born again, that begins to be written out. And so I think one of the things I want to show you here too is we'll be reading about the scriptures about the groves, and here are the groves. There's in this concordance, there's grove, and then there's groves, and then when you go and look into the Hebrew, it's 842, and in 842 the word is Asherah, or Asherah pole, or grove. So, like I said, that was a lot of times her symbol was this pole. The symbol saying here on this here, the Asherah pole was one of her symbols, and of course but they both Inanna or Ishtar and Asherah, they both have all of these similarities that you really just can't get away from. And so that's why it's really believed that they're both the same. It's the same entity. It's just that, depending on the culture and on their language, they just call them something different, but they're talking about the same entity, because I've told this before about how at Babel, all religions come from there. All the false religions come from Babel. And if you think about it, whenever the father called out, because Abraham was alive during the time of Nimrod. He was a child. He was younger than Nimrod was. Had been king for a long time over there. And whenever the languages were confounded, and the Tower of Babel the building of it was shut down, Nimrod didn't die or nothing. I mean, he still was a king, but the languages were so confounded that they couldn't do anything. They couldn't communicate to accomplish anything anymore. And of course, and he wanted these people to disperse over the face of the earth and populate the earth. He didn't want them gathering up there in one spot like they had been doing. And so, because they get into mischief, just like they had been doing. And so, basically, he created 70 nations with 70 languages, and they had 70 gods over them. That's what the Father allowed, and said, you want to worship these gods, these created beings, and these planets, and these stars and all that stuff. You want to worship all that stuff? Okay, I'm going to give you over to them. And so they went out, and so then he finds the smallest tribe of people on the earth, which was the tribe that Abraham was from. They lived in Ur of the Chaldeans, which was over there around Babel. It was between Babel and Nineveh. And of course, the Ninevites, they were the Assyrians. And you also had the Akkadians and the Sumerians and then the Chaldeans. They were all kind of in this general area, because again, that's where civilization restarted at, was over there north and east of Nineveh. Because really, when you look at the history of the Assyrians, their history goes back to 2500 BC, which is just slightly right after this period of time of Babel, which was somewhere around 2800 BC. Because it wasn't that long after, if the flood happened in 3000 BC, and you go forward a couple of hundred years to the time of Nimrod, and his father Cush, and he's still, still alive at this time. And then somewhere around, 2600 to 2700, Abraham's alive. Then the father calls Abraham out because he's going to create his own little nation of people, and people that are going to serve him. And out of all the people of the world, and of course they have the native language. They have the Hebrew, which is the original language. And so they, end up going, eventually, he leaves Ur and he goes to Haran, him and his family, and he stays there until his father dies. And then the father, Yahweh calls him again and tells him to go to the land of Canaan. And of course, the land of Canaan had become a hotbed of these hybrids. It was full of them, and there were satyrs there, and there were other hybrid creatures that they were there. Probably, there was these cave dwellers that they called them troglodytes, and that lived in caves and underground. And then you had the Zanzumim, they made a buzzing noise that was, and you can go kind of, the Raphaim, the Walking Dead, but you can go and look. This is what that whole land was full of whenever Abraham went there. But he had Yahweh on his side, that was protecting him and keeping him from a harm from these entities. Because I'm sure, Satan knew exactly what was going on, and, would have tried to have him killed or whatever if he could have. Because he did before he left from over there. Nimrod wanted to kill him, but he was protected. So, again, I went here last week, and I'm going to go here again to Deuteronomy chapter 13 or chapter 12, beginning at verse 28. Observe and hear all these words which I command thee, that it may go well with thee, and with thy children after thee forever, which thou doest that which is good and right in the sight of Yahweh thy Elohim, when Yahweh thy Elohim shall cut off the nations from before thee, whither thou goest, to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land. Take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto Yahweh thy Elohim, for every abomination to Yahweh which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What thing soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereunto, nor diminish from it. And of course, we see that, and they even talk about that in here, that after the Messiah come, between the 1st century and the 6th century, the worship of Ishtar and Baal and Moloch and all, it kind of went away. I mean, it really went away. Maybe went underground. I mean, there's probably still people still doing it, of course, but it was not as prevalent. It was, pretty much suppressed and underground. But after that period, especially among the Catholic Church, is where it really began to be promulgated again. And by proxy, it worked its way down through into the Protestant churches, even after the Reformation and all that stuff. It worked its way into there to where we're at now, to where, these practices, with Ishtar worship, which is the BVM, the Blessed Virgin Mary. That's all that is. Because when you see depictions of her, because like here, like I said, this is Inanna or Ishtar. It says her planet is Venus, and a lot of times when you see depictions of her, let's see, I got some pictures in here that show her with Venus under her feet. And there's images of the BVM that show the exact same thing, with her standing there with a crescent like this under her feet. And that is, of course, the symbol of Ishtar. And so if the BVM has got these symbols under her feet like that, then what does that tell you? But so that's her symbol of this particular goddess, but it's the same goddess. I mean, because this one here, it talks about her being, groves and stuff like that. And in Jeremiah, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about this Inanna or Ishtar or Ashtaroth. It's the same entities. Now, and I've read from Deuteronomy chapter 28, at verse 14. And the Levites shall speak and say unto all the men of Israel with a loud voice, Cursed be the man that maketh any graven or molten image, an abomination unto Yahweh, the work of the hands of the craftsman, and putteth it in a secret place. And all the people shall say, Amen. And this is when they went to Gerizim and Ebal. There was a big valley there, and there was two mountains, and half the tribes stood on one, and half the tribes went on the others, and this represented the blessings, this represented the cursings. And it said, cursed be the man that does this, and makes these graven images, or setteth up a high place, or groves, or, secret places. And, because that's what they did. And then you go here to Joshua, chapter 13, verse 12. And the kingdom of Og in Bashan, which reigned in Ashtaroth. All right, they had a city there. King Og had a city called Ashtaroth because that was the center of their worship of this goddess. And so they went in there and they killed King Og, and he was a giant. I mean, there's this, I can't remember where the scripture is right at my fingertips, but it describes his bed as being like 9 cubits or something like that, which is somewhere between 15 and 18 feet. So, I mean, he was a big dude. And it says, who remained of the remnant of the giants. He was one of the last of them. He was from the sons of Anak, I believe, the Anakim. But for these did Moses smite and cast them out. And this was down in Ashtaroth Karnim, which was an area, it wasn't in the land that they were going into. This is when they were wandering out there in the wilderness, and they came to this place and they killed all these giants, these descendants of the giants. It says, nevertheless, the children of Israel expelled not the Geshurites nor the Maachites, but the Geshurites and the Maachites dwell among the Israelites unto this day. And they had trouble from them for, and this is in Joshua, this is after they began to go into the land and stuff, that they had trouble because of these, because they didn't get rid of them. All right. And then you got here in Joshua 17, 17 and verse 15. And Joshua answered them, if thou be a great people, then get thee up to the wood country, and cut down for thyself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the giants, the Rephaims, if Mount Ephraim be too narrow for thee. And the children, and what it's talking about is they went up there and they cut down these groves up there, that where they were worshiping these Ashtaroth, because they had already started doing. These Rephaim were already doing this. That's why I said don't go after don't follow after them. After I come in, bring you into the land and you drive them out, don't follow after their gods. Don't ask, how did they worship their gods. You don't do it. Then we come to the book of Judges, chapter 2, and a messenger of, it says an angel, but angel means messenger, of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Boshem and said, I made you to go out of Egypt and have brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And that's the difference between our Messiah and our Elohim, is they make a covenant and they keep it. They don't lie. And he never broke his covenant with them. They did. And he told them, I'm making a covenant with you there at Gilgal and Ebal. I'm making this covenant with you. And these are the blessings that come with it. But these are the cursings that come with it if you break it. If you break it. He didn't break it. And it says, and ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars. But ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. He wouldn't drive them out after that because they refused to do what he told them. He told them to drive them out and to break down their altars, their groves, and their high places, to destroy them from before them. And they didn't do it. And so he allowed these people to, end up staying in there, to be a thorn in their side and a snare unto them. That was what the result of it was. That was the result of their disobedience, was that he says, okay, you're not going to obey my voice when I told you to get rid of them. So now I'm going to leave them here so that, because he's the one that really was driving these giants out. Yeah, he led the children of Israel in their battles, and he was the one that was really driving them out. But because they did not go and destroy all these groves and all these high places and these altars and stuff that they had and these images, he allowed some of them to remain there, to be a thorn in the flesh to them and to be a snare unto them, and they wound up being that. And then that's in Judges chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. And then you got verse 10, and also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there arose another generation after them which knew not Elohim, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and served Baalim. And they forsook Yahweh Elohim of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, and of the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked Yahweh to anger. And they forsook Yahweh, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Generally, these were, they would have a high place where they had an image of Baal, and then they would have a grove right beside it that represented Ashtaroth, or one of these poles. And then you come to Judges chapter 13. Judges chapter 13 and verse 6. Make sure I'm looking. Oh no, I was supposed to. Yeah, okay, I'm wrong. Chapter 6. I went to the wrong chapter here. Joshua chapter 17 and verse 15. It says, I think I just read that. Yeah. All right. And then Judges chapter 6. Chapter 6 and verse 25. And it came to pass the same night that Yahweh said unto him, and this is, when Gideon he's being called to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Midianites, I believe. Yeah, the Midianites. And he built it an altar there and called it Yahweh Shalom, or peace. Yahweh, the Lord of peace. In Oprah of the Abiezerites. And it came to pass that same night that Yahweh said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it. See, they had an altar there of Baal, and beside it was a grove. These two particular are always together. And when it comes to the one Moloch, there's a couple different trains of thought on it. One, that Moloch was a entity that they worship, but also some people think that Moloch means just basically to sacrifice. So, next week I'm going to dive into that one. But these two, Baal and Ishtar or Ashtaroth, are always together. I mean, they're the big instigators. And again, these are not fallen entities. Okay, these are the offspring of the fallen ones. Because when you go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the Father says, Yahweh says, I will put enmity between the woman and her seed and the serpent and his seed. Okay? So they're not directly worshiping the fallen ones. They're worshiping their offspring, their seed. And so that's what you're seeing here is that Baal and Ishtar or Istarte or Ashtaroth is their offspring. And so, these people are worshiping their offspring. And of course it says you cut and build an altar unto Yahweh Elohim upon the top of this rock in the ordered place, and take the second bullock and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the grove which thou shalt cut down. In other words, you cut that grove down. Cut down Ashtaroth. You cut it down, and you put this bullock on there, and you burn it with that wood. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants, and did as Yahweh had said unto them, and so it was, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night. Because this idol and this altar and this grove had been set up by his father. And when you read about, if you read some of the extra biblical texts like the book of Jasher, and you read about Abraham's father, he was Nahor. Yeah, I think his name was Nahor. He made idols. He was an idol maker. That's what he did. And he had all these idols. He had a special room in his house that was full of these idols. And Abraham destroyed them. So his father, Gideon's father, has got this altar and this grove that he set up, and all the people of the city there came up there to worship at this stuff. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, and behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. They, rose up, and they got really, they was wanting to kill Gideon and those guys that helped him do this. And it says, therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, and this is Gideon. His name was changed to Jerubbaal. And here in the margin it says, that is, let the infamous thing contend. And because what happened is Gideon's father, Joash, said to these people, when they come up there and told them to send out Gideon so that he may die, because he hath cast down the altar of Baal, and because he hath cut down the grove that was by it. And Joash said unto them all that stood against him, will ye plead for Baal? Will ye save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death whilst it is yet morning. If he be a god, let him plead for himself. because one hath cast down his altar. In other words, whenever Gideon cast his altar down and all that, why ain't Baal saying something about it? Because he can't do anything. No, the only thing they can do is corrupt men, corrupt their minds, and get them to do that which is contrary to our Elohim's command. They don't do anything themselves. They can't do anything. They're disembodied spirits. But they can corrupt men and get them to do it. That's what, I've talked about that, how that's, when you look, the Father, he does the same thing. He uses men to accomplish his purposes. Yeah, he can directly intervene, if he feels it necessary. And he has throughout Scripture. There's, you see in places where he has directly intervened. But the majority of the time, when you read right here what we're seeing, he's using men to accomplish his purpose. And these entities do the same. They use people to accomplish their purposes. And so it's a battle between, when you look at Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and he calls fire down out of heaven, well, where does that fire come from? It comes from the Father. It comes from Yahuwah. And consume those sacrifices that Elijah had put up there, and the prophets, and he had soaked it with water, and he was given the strength and the might to go down there and kill all of those prophets. So the Father raised up Elijah, and he raised up all the prophets to accomplish his purpose and to warn Israel. This is this stuff goes on over and over and over again. Whenever this is in the Judges, so he raised up judges. Joshua was one; he was a judge, and then you had here you got Gideon, and then you got Deborah, and you got Samson, and on and on. That he, because what will end up happening is they get to doing this stuff, and he lets the Philistines or the Amorites or the Amalekites or the Midianites or somebody come in there and take them over and enslave them or subjugate them. And so they do this stuff over and over again. And then you have in verse 6. I read those 28 and 32. All right, now you go to 1 Kings. Actually, go to 1 Samuel. And of course, Samuel was a prophet, and he was a priest. Samuel 5, chapter 7, and verse 3 through 4. Chapter 7, verses 3 through 4. And it says, And Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, If you do return unto Yahuwah with all your heart, then put away the strange gods and Ashtaroth from among you, and prepare your hearts unto Yahuwah, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. Then the children of Israel did put away Baalim and Ashtaroth, and served Yahuwah only. This was, this has been the motive, the motif, or the modus operandi throughout the time that they went into the land. It is just, like I said a while ago, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The end result was the same every time. They ended up getting enslaved or taken over, by the enemies around them. But whenever they would do right, they were able to defend themselves against these people because Yahweh was with them. And but you know. Then look at Samuel chapter 12, verse 10. Chapter 12, verse 10. And they cried unto Yahweh and said, We have sinned because we have forsaken Yahweh and have served Baalim and Ashtaroth. But now deliver us out of the hand of our enemies, and we will serve thee. Same thing every time. Every time. The only time they end up caught, that's why he said earlier there in Joshua, I'm leaving some of these here to be a snare unto you. Really to be there so whenever you get out of line, I'm going to use them against you. And to bring you back to me. And this goes on and on, over and over again. And here in Samuel chapter 31, and I think that's verse 18 or verse 10. And they put his armor, and this is talking about, I think this is when Saul died. When Saul died, it says and they put his armor when he died. It says, and it came to pass on the morrow when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth. And they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. I mean, Saul came to a bad end. And that's because he went to that familiar there in Endor and inquired of the familiar about, and at this time Samuel was dead, and he went there and inquired of this familiar, and the spirit of Saul was raised up, or Samuel was raised up, and he told him, because of what you've done, you're going to die this day. And not only did he die, but all his, Jonathan and all of them died because of it. So his bloodline was cut off, and because of what he did, and so look what the Philistines did. I mean, that's how they honored him. They cut his head off and hung it up in the temple of their goddess. And when you look at America and what's happening to it, I mean, the same things that befell them is going to befall us. I mean, our enemies are coming across our border. I mean, now they're saying there's probably as many as 15 million people come across our border down there. And they are our enemies. They're not our friends. And even huge numbers of Chinese. So, we're being set up. We're being set up to be took over. That's just all there is to it. And it goes back to Deuteronomy 28. I mean, read it again. You can't read it enough to get the idea of what, when you can see these things that it tells, the curses in there that it tells us about, they're happening to us. Because people won't repent and turn. And they think there's some kind of political solution going to save us. It ain't. Because all of these people, I don't care who they are under the same powers. They have yielded themselves over to these and given themselves over to these powers to be used by them. And they don't care about us. They don't care one iota about the American people. They've been raised up. This is the same thing that, just like they're, in Joshua, where it says that that some of these are left here because you didn't drive them out, or you ain't drove this stuff out and destroyed all these groves and all these high places and all these, some of them have been left to remain. Well, it's just like when they let people like the Freemasons, the accepted Freemasons in, and didn't, run them out when they had the chance, but they were accepted. And that's why they're everywhere. And they're the ones that are promoting, ultimately Luciferianism and Satanism, and it's in the churches, it's in everything. It's everywhere. And most of these politicians and all, they're all in these secret societies, whether it's the Council on Foreign Relations, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Jesuits, the Order of the Snake, you name it. They are members of these things. They all have the same agenda. That is to destroy Israel. The house of Judah and the house of Israel. And I've talked about how we are descended from the house of Israel. So, when it talks about the time of Jacob's trouble, the time of Israel's trouble, that apply. It ain't just that little country over there in the Levant, over there in the Eastern Mediterranean. Nope. No, it's talking about the whole of Israel. That includes us, the British Commonwealth, the Nordic peoples, the French. It includes us all. Because, and because we have done exactly like they did back here, like we're seeing here in Samuel and Judges, over and over and over again, put up these altars and these groves, and they're all over America, man. The Bohemian Grove, they brought that temple of Baal, the gate entrance or whatever to the temple of Baal. They brought it over here and set it up in New York City. You got that bull there on Wall Street. That's the symbol of Baal. Now they're putting up these Baphomets everywhere. Doing the same thing. And of course, the result of it, again, do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. No. The end result will be the exact same thing as it was for the children of Israel. Conquest and destruction and enslavement. It happens every time. Alright, we're going to go here to 1 Kings. Look at 1 Kings chapter 14. And you notice that a lot of these scriptures are the same scriptures I read last week, because they're talking about because these gods tend to be together. They partners in crime, if you will. 1 Kings chapter 14 verse 15. For Yahweh shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and he shall root up Israel out of this good land which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their groves, provoking Yahweh to anger. And when you go in to the concordance and look up, if you go in there and look up groves, go back into the Hebrew lexicon of the concordance, it's Ashtaroth. 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 That's what it means. Chapter 15 verse 13. And also Maacah, his mother, even her he removed from being queen, because she had made an idol in her grove. She had, and Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron. But the high places were not removed, Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with Yahweh all his days. Asa was a good king, and he done right. But that was his mother's idol and grove, and he destroyed it. So, this was, this is during the time of the kings. This is after the time of the judges. So, and then we have chapter 21. So you see, through each phase of Israel's history, this is going on. It never stops. And that's because these entities don't ever rest. They don't ever give up. They don't ever stop. They don't eat. They don't sleep. They don't do any of that. They just go on and on and on. And so this is chapter 21 and verse 7. And Jezebel, his wife, this is Ahab's wife, said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name. This is when she killed Naboth to get his vineyard, and they wanted to set up a grove there, and because he could look out of out of his castle or whatever, out of his house, and look down there and see it, and he lusted after it. And that's she's a type. Jezebel's a type of these goddesses too. And let's see, also chapter 11 verse 5 in here. Chapter 11 verse 5. And Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. Solomon, he really went off the deep end. He was worshiping every god that there was, false god, because he married all these women from all over the place that they were forbidden to marry. They weren't supposed to marry in with these people because of that very thing, because it would become a snare to them, and they would do that very thing. And he began to worship her. Then in chapter 11, verse 33, because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Didonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life, for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. And so, but I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. And unto his son will I give 1 tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen. And that's exactly what happened under Rehoboam and Jeroboam, which was Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and the only thing that was left to him was Judah, and of course the Benjamites and the Levites. But basically, he says he'll leave him 1 tribe other than his own tribe, which was Judah. He left the Benjamites. And of course the Levites, they were under themselves. They were not, they were a priesthood. So, and then 10 tribes went north, the northern kingdom, the house of Israel. And that's exactly what happened. He's telling them here in 1 Kings, he's, telling this is what's going to happen because of what you've done. And it did happen. As soon as Solomon was dead in the ground, it wasn't long. There was civil war, and this is, it was divided up. And it was all because of worshiping these false gods. All right, now we're going to look in 2 Kings, chapter 16. 2 Kings, chapter 16, and verses 3 and 4. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. In other words, he, going all the way back to Jeroboam. I mean, he's walking in their ways. Yea, and made his son to pass through the fire. In other words, he sacrificed his own son. To pass through the fire according to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord hath cast out before the children of Israel. And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree. And every green tree is talking about evergreens, fir trees and cypresses and and the cedars and stuff. That's and that's Ashtaroth. That's what they were doing, and of course, this is when they began to have trouble with the Syrians and the Assyrians, because the Syrians and the Assyrians are different peoples group or different powers or whatever. But and that's when, and this is the time whenever they. The beginning of their going into captivity under the Assyrians, and they never went back to Israel from that point on. And then we're looking at chapter 23, verse 13 of 2 Kings. Second Kings, chapter 23. And verse 13. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the mount of corruption, which Solomon, the king of Israel, had builded for Ashtaroth, or Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile, and he brake in pieces the images, and cut down the groves, and filled their places with the bones of men. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel, and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both that altar and the high place he brake down, and burned the high place, and stamped it small to powder, and burned the grove. And this is during, and here again, right before that, verse 10, and he defiled Topheth, which is the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Moloch. And so and this is during the time of Josiah, the king of Judah. He's the one that, he was a righteous king, and he went and knocked down all this stuff and destroyed all this stuff, not only in Judah, but up in the house of Israel too. Because it was a snare to him, and he was getting rid of it. But after he died, they'd go right back to doing it again. After you have a righteous king, a righteous judge, a righteous ruler that would do right, and they would be blessed, and things would go good for them. And just as soon as this righteous king would die and another one would come up, he'd turn out to be a tyrant, or began to worship these idols and stuff like that. See, it always seems that being blessed and having the goodness and material blessing and all always tends to lead to this idolatry. Away from the one who gave you the blessing, to giving credit to false gods. I mean, when you look at when you begin to read some of the stories about these here, how they, at these feasts and stuff, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, these festivals and feasts, they're giving these entities credit for their good crops and for rain and for plenty, rather than giving it to our Creator. Just insanity. Now we look here at 2 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter 15. Chapter 15 and verse 13. We'll start at verse 12. And they entered into a covenant to seek Yahweh Elohim of their fathers with all their heart and with all their soul, that whosoever would not seek Yahweh Elohim of Israel should be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman. And they swear unto Yahweh with a loud voice and with shouting. And this is because the same thing. This is under Asa. He was a good king, and he, that's the one I said a while ago that he destroyed his mother's altar that she had and statue of Ashtaroth. He destroyed it because it was always usually the matriarchs that worshipped the goddess that kind of destroyed that, or brought that in. And so Asa is, he's telling them what to do. They tell them you need to go back to worshiping Yahweh Elohim of your fathers and get away from these false gods. And then you come to verse 24 of let's see, 2 Chronicles chapter 15 and chapter 24. Let me look in chapter 24. Chapter 24 and verses 18 through 19. And they left the house of Yahweh Elohim of their fathers and served groves and idols, and wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for their trespass. Yet he sent prophets to them to bring them again unto Yahweh, and they testified against them, but they would not give ear. He sent, he would send people like Zechariah and Isaiah and different ones to prophesy to them about it, to turn away from these idols and these things, but they wouldn't give ear to it. In fact, they'd kill a lot of them. They killed a lot of the prophets because they didn't want to hear it. Because it's talking about, and the spirit of Elohim came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest, which stood above the people, and said unto them, Thus saith Elohim, Why transgress ye the commandments of Yahweh, that ye cannot prosper? Because ye have forsaken Yahweh, he hath also forsaken you. And that's what's happened to America. He's forsaken us. Because we are, as a nation, the people of this nation and our government, they worship these gods. Like I said, just look at Washington, D.C. Look at all the gods and idols that they got around there. I mean, they're everywhere. And Isaiah And of course, Isaiah, he prophesied against the house of Israel a lot because they were doing the same thing. They had been in idolatry for hundreds of years. This is chapter 17 of Isaiah, verse 18. 17. I got verse 18 out of that. I think it's at verse 10. I'm sorry. Chapter 17, verse 10. Because thou hast forgotten the Elohim of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength, therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants, and shall sit it with strange slips. In the day shalt thou make thy plant to grow, and in the morning shalt thou make thy seed to flourish. But the harvest shall be a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. In other words, this is the result. You're going to plant and all that stuff, but you're going to reap sorrows, what you're going to reap, because you will not turn back to me. Again, he's going to turn his back on them. Because they, are doing these things. And now we're going to look in chapter 27. Chapter 27 and verse 9 of Isaiah. By this, therefore, shall the iniquity of Jacob be purged, and this is all the fruit to take away his sin, when he maketh all the stones of the altar as chalk stones that are beaten in sunder, the groves and images shall not stand up. So he's saying here, that if you want to have the iniquity purged out from among you, you got to destroy these altars, destroy these groves, and destroy these images. And then he'll, turn back to you. It says, and yet the defenced city shall be desolate, and the habitation forsaken, and left like a wilderness. There shall the calf feed, and there shall he lie down, and consume the branches thereof. Because they, if they don't repent and turn from it and do that, destroy those things, those idols and stuff, then they're going to be condemned. And of course, condemnation of Ephraim, because that's what they were doing, which is the house of Israel. They were doing all this stuff, and they've been doing it since Jeroboam. They're the first king of the house of Judah, or Israel. All right, now we're going to look in Jeremiah 44. Actually, Jeremiah 19. Jeremiah chapter 19. I got that. I'm looking at a verse there. Sorry about that. Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7 and verse 18. All right. The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Do they provoke me to anger, saith Yahweh? Do they not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces? Therefore, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, behold, my anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place, upon man, and upon beast, and upon the trees of the field, upon the fruit of the ground, and it shall burn and shall not be quenched. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, put your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices, and eat flesh. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing commanded I them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and ye shall be my people, and walk ye in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well unto you. So, he wants us to obey him. He don't care about sacrifices and all that stuff. He wants our obedience. All right, now we'll look here at Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 14. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Supposedly he's the son of Ishtar or Ashtaroth. And this is one of the things that is Freemasonry. That's big in Freemasonry, about the weeping, the weeping women, and the for the god Tammuz. Yeah. Hiram McBiff. Yep. Now we're going to look in the book of Acts. Get a New Testament perspective on it. All right, we're going to look in Acts chapter 19 and verse 27. So that not only this our craft is, this is Paul. He's in Ephesus, and it says, moreover, I'm going to go at verse 26. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods which are made with hands, so that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. And that's pretty true. I mean, they did pretty much all over the known world there. They worship Diana or Ishtar or Ashtaroth, whatever you want to call her. It's the same entity. And boy, they were up in arms about this, because they made these silver idols and stuff, and it was, people quit buying them because Paul was, converting people. And they quit worshiping Diana. And it says, and when they heard these things, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion, and having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. Because these people wanted to kill him, and because, he was calling out their worship of Diana. And that's what I was saying a while ago, from the 1st century up to about the 6th century, this worship of Baal and Ashtaroth and Moloch and all that stuff went away. The power of the Messiah and the anointing of his disciples and the apostles, the anointing on the believers gave them the power to cast these entities out. And they did. They cast them out, and everywhere they went. And but now we see them coming back with a vengeance. And beginning in the early 60s, I mean, don't get me wrong, their spirit was always around, looking for the proselytes, the people to be their spokespeople, and and they done it through these secret societies that have kept them going and kept them alive in people's minds. The Masons and the Illuminati and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Group of Rome and the Jesuits and all these different secret societies. That's what they do, is they promote these entities and keep them going and keep their spirit here. And now they have come, like I say, they've come back with a vengeance, and we see the result of it. And the only way to get rid of them is to have repentance. I mean, from the king down, as the old saying goes, like during Nineveh, whenever Jonah went there and told them they were going to be destroyed, and they repented from the king down, and the father withheld his judgment on them for 40 years. And it was after that king had died, after his reign, they went back to doing what they were doing before that, and they ended up being destroyed. The Medo-Persians and the Greeks or the Persians and the Babylonians and the Medes overthrew them and drove them out. But anyway, folks, there you have it. That's the what the Bible has to say about worshiping this entity, this Ashtaroth, or the Queen of Heaven, or a star, Astarte, Easter, whatever you want to call her, Diana, Dione, goes by all these different names, but it's the same entity. And we see that the World Council of Churches, which is has all these different denominations, and you see these bumper stickers that's got the symbol, the star rim fan, or the Star of David, as they say, but it ain't a star rim fan. And the Christian cross, and the sun and moon, the star and the crescent of Islam, and Buddhism and Hinduism, and all these different symbols on there. That's the World Council of Churches. Ecumenicalism. Ecumenicalism is the joining of all these churches and religions all under one umbrella. The Catholic Church is the mother, the mother church, and the Protestant churches had always had a declaration of their doctrine and belief, and part of it was one Creator, one Messiah, and the Messiah is the only way to the Creator. But the ecumenicals believe in a co-redemptrix. The early before this ecumenicalism, it was sola fide, salvation through one. Now it's co-redemptrix. You can be saved by Mary. You don't need Messiah. You don't need Yahshua. You don't need him. You don't need Yeshua or Yahushua. You don't need him. You just need the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Queen of Heaven. And so this is what's coming. This is going to be this false religious system that is, going to be goddess worship, and back to Baal and goddess worship, co-redemptrix, and the Protestant churches here in America, they're a lot of them have already joined in with this and are all in agreement with it. And I wouldn't say that all of the the hardcore, churches, the dispensational churches are on board with this, but they're wrong too. They are led astray as well. So, and it's this the spirit of the age, as the Germans call it, the Zeitgeist, the spirit of the age that we are in, and they've showed up and they're wide open. And so I hope that through this lesson and through this study, you'll be able to identify the characteristics of these entities and how they operate and stay away from it and lead other people away from them. Because a lot of people just don't realize that they're doing this, worshiping these entities, because they don't recognize the hallmarks of it. But when they start letting in these idolatrous practices into these churches, that's exactly what they're doing. And so, with that, I'm going to end it here. I love you folks. I appreciate you watching these studies. I hope that that you get something from it, that it'll bless you. As always, be good Bereans. Don't believe what I tell you. Go do your study. Read what the scripture says. And for yourself, do you some homework. Go pull up some of this stuff, and just see. You'll see a trend. You'll see an origin, a place of origin for this stuff over there around Babel. That's where it started, and that's where it spread out from. And it's the same entities everywhere. No matter where you go in the world, it's the same entities over and over again. So, and like I say, you can get some good information off of Wikipedia. Not all of it's bad, because a lot of this is stuff that is just pretty generic, and it's got all the references in there. So if you want to go look at some of these authors of some of these books about this stuff, you can go read what they have to say about it. And there's no prohibition against studying from secular writers. I mean, because sometimes you can gain some insights that you might not have had before. As far as the origins of where this comes from, and even some of these secular people will give you some truth that maybe your preacher ain't going to give you. And the Bible is going to give it to you, but a lot of these people that are deceived, that are using these modern translations of Scripture, they use them because it gets rid of a lot of this stuff that they don't want people to know what's going on. They don't want them to understand these entities and how they've manifested themselves. And so, that being the case, study. And that you don't be deceived. Make that be the prayer of your heart. Father, reveal your truth to me, that I not be deceived. Because it says he deceives the Hasatan, the adversary. He deceives the whole world. He deceives the whole world. And he would deceive even the elect, if it were possible. And the only reason it's not possible is because we have the Ruach HaKodesh to lead us to truth and to teach us. But we have to really sincerely in our hearts want to know the truth for it to be revealed. So that's my prayer for you, that you will seek with all your heart to know the truth, to know our Messiah, to know our Elohim, and not be deceived, because he deceives the whole world. I mean, so, and we see it. I mean, he deceives the whole world. And we see it going on everywhere. They're deceived into believing into these, buying into these entities again. So, I love you folks. I'll see you on the next Shabbat. if Yahweh is willing.